Lisa. Thank you for coming to join me. I've got a wonderful Discover You story to share with you today. It's all about being different. Oh, isn't it funny to think about what the world might be like if we were all the same? Wouldn't it be boring? This story is a celebration of the many differences there are between the people that you and I like to read about. Shall we begin? All different. This is a story about celebrating our differences. We are all wonderfully different and equally special. What makes you, you? Meet Little Miss Tiny. Little Miss Tiny is very small. So small that she lives in a mouse hole at home farm. Little Miss Tiny sometimes wishes she was taller. Did you know that she has a friend called Mr Tall? Mr Tall is quite possibly the tallest person in the world. Once upon a time, Mr Tall wished his legs weren't so very, very long. But then, with some help from his friends, he realised he's perfect just the way he is. But that's another story. One of the friends who helped him was Mr Tickle, who has extraordinarily long arms. Oh, see what I mean? Now, Mr Tickle was going to help Little Miss Tiny too. One day, Mr Tickle saw Little Miss Tiny looking very sad. "Are you okay, Little Miss Tiny?" he asked kindly. "I wish I was bigger," she replied. "I went to the park and I'm too tiny to get on the swing." Mr Tickle smiled widely. "Would you like some help?" he asked. And with a nod from Little Miss Tiny, he used his extraordinarily long arms as her very own perfectly sized swing. "That was fun," she giggled. "Do you like having long arms, Mr Tickle?" "I love my long arms," he exclaimed. "They're great for reaching things, even when I'm in a different room. And best of all, they're perfect for tickling. They make me, me." And can you guess what Mr Tickle did then? That's right, he tickled Little Miss Tiny. "I just wish I could reach to tickle you back," she said between giggles. "Life would be dull if we were all the same," replied Mr Tickle, with one last tickle. Do you have friends that are different from you? The Mr Men and Little Miss are all different shapes, sizes and colours, and have different personalities too. Little Miss Sunshine is as joyful as a summer's day and can always see on the bright side, while Mr Grumpy is as gloomy as a storm cloud and tends to look on the bleak side. Little Miss Neat is probably the tidiest person in the world and can't stand a mess, whereas Mr Messy is so messy that he's even left a trail of messy fingerprints on this page. Oh, and on your screen. As you may have realised, their names say quite a lot about them. But there's much more to Little Miss Tiny than her size. "Shall we go back to the park?" asked Mr Tickle. "Time to go on a real swing?" "Yes, please," smiled Little Miss Tiny. "I also want to go on the slide and climbing frame and roundabout. And I love seeing everyone and talking to them." Little Miss Tiny may be small, but she has a big personality. When they arrived at the park, Mr Clever was reading his book in the shade. Mr Clever enjoys learning and exercising his brain. He's a good person to talk to if you want to understand something. While Little Miss Somersault was doing somersaults across the sports equipment. She is full of energy and loves being active. The perfect person to play with at the park. Little Miss Tiny went straight over to join Little Miss Somersault. Then Mr Tickle used his extraordinarily long arms to lift Little Miss Tiny onto the swing. With some big pushes from Mr Strong, she was soon going higher than Little Miss Brave. "You're fearless, little Miss Tiny," laughed Mr Tickle. "I don't think I could ever swing you that high." Mr Jelly looked on in horror, as he prefers to keep his feet firmly on the ground. Do you like doing different things to your friends? The world is all the more balanced and interesting because people are different. Little Miss Chatterbox likes to talk a lot, while Mr Quiet prefers the quiet life. Little Miss Quick is always in a hurry, while Mr Slow likes to do things slowly. What name would your family give you? Nothing is too splendid for little Miss Splendid. She lives in a huge house surrounded by large gardens, whereas Mr Silly lives in quite the silliest looking house you've ever seen. As you may know, Mr Silly lives in Nonsense Land, where everything is as silly as can be. Their houses are very different, but suit them both perfectly. Did you know there's a place called Two Land? And in Two Land, there's two of everything. And that's where Little Miss Twins live. That day, Little Miss Twin and Little Miss Twin were at the park. They are almost as small as Little Miss Tiny. Now, the Little Miss Twins may look alike, but they are very different. One Little Miss Twin is as angelic as Mr Perfect, while the other Little Miss Twin is very cheeky and good friends with Little Miss Naughty. The twins are individuals. Their differences make them who they are. The friends all decided to play a game of hide and seek. Little Miss Tiny found it easy to find Mr Tickle with his long arms and Little Miss Somersault with her long legs. But one Little Miss Twin was particularly hard to find. Can you guess who that was? That's right, it was the cheeky Little Miss Twin. Where could she be? Little Miss Tiny searched high and low and soon realised that size is her superpower, as she's able to get into the smallest places. She found Little Miss Twin in the hollow of a tree. It looks like being tiny isn't so bad after all, she laughed. Mr Tickle beamed happily. You may be tiny, but you're brave and funny too. And I say that calls for double the tickles, with which Little Miss Twin cheekily tickled her too. Oh wow, what a lovely story. Ooh, I'm feeling hungry now. My favourite sandwich. Ham, marmalade and mashed up banana. What? We're all different. I do hope you'll join me again soon, or maybe come back and listen to this Discover You story again. Take care.